Number 5. You're next. Hey, family dinners are always a bit awkward, aren't they? You know, trying to get the gravy passed to you, trying to avoid an argument with your uncle about your career, and trying to elude the vicious sickos that are hunting you and your family for sport. You're Next is a 2011 slasher directed by Adam Wingard, who also blessed us with Godzilla vs. Kong, one of the finest films ever made. Made on a humble $1 million budget, You're Next is a horror movie that brings it to the absolute basics. One house, one troubled family, and 3 very dangerous psychopaths. An estranged family is meeting for a reunion at their summer home in the rural deep south, and newcomer to the family, Erin, is nervous to be introduced officially as her boyfriend's long-term partner. Now, tensions are high enough with the usual family drama before the first crossbow bolt pierces the window, as the family is being hunted by a relentless pack of bloodthirsty animal mask-wearing lunatics who seem to be doing this whole thing just for kicks. Watch the family fall apart under pressure, metaphorically and uncomfortably literally, as they're picked off one by one by their sick predators, until one of them starts to rise up unexpectedly against their tormentors. Now, if you were a fan of the Hotline Miami games, this is probably as close as you're ever going to get to a movie for that 80s splatter feel and all the animal mask wearing lunatics. You're Next feels like a movie that got time traveled from 1984 in the best way. It's a throwback to the golden age of B-horror movies. Wet, gross, stupid, and in the darkest ways, really funny. This movie's almost a dysfunctional family comedy, if you can call it that. It's sinister, sick, gruesome, and hilarious, has an absolutely great sense of style, really cool soundtrack, and I guarantee you the main song from the movie is gonna get stuck in your head for weeks afterwards. Definitely check You're Next out if you're looking for some fluffy horror fun. I've got a DVD at home if you want to borrow it. Now, hey ghouls and goblins, you already know that the best place for the scary video— Hey ghouls and goblins, you already know the best place for scary videos on the web is right here, but if somehow you didn't know that, always a good time to learn, so why don't you subscribe so you never miss a scare. Number 4. The Color Out of Space. When we think H.P. Lovecraft, we tend to think of giant squid monsters and incomprehensible madness. Well, this movie's got one of those in folds, and it's not the squid monster. The Color Out of Space is a 2019 horror movie directed by Richard Stanley, adapting the H.P. Lovecraft story of the exact same name, but modernizing it slightly, bringing it up to the 21st century. The story details a father moving his family to his late father's farm, escaping the bright lights and humdrum of city life, moving to his hometown of Arkham, the exceedingly cursed city from Lovecraft's writings. What should be a breath of fresh air and lovely times in the cottage turns to a nightmare when an asteroid falls to the farm, releasing with it a mysterious color that seeps into the farmland. A color out of space, if you will. It affects the minds of everyone around the farm, all the animals, and begins to seep into the water and drive everyone to incomprehensible madness. Nick Cage plays the patriarch of the Gardner family, and let me tell you, there could not possibly have been a better actor for the lead in a movie about slowly going mad. I mean, Nick Cage on his absolute best day already seems like he's about 2 screws short of absolute madness, so watching him in this is a treat. You spend the entire time wondering if the insanity is taking him over and consuming his brain, or if that's just how Nicolas Cage talks and he thinks he's doing a New England accent right now. Color Out of Space builds really slowly, leaving you on edge the entire time, and when the madness sets in, it sets in hard as you painfully watch the farmstead fall, desperate that maybe, just maybe, someone will pull through against the immeasurable horror of some entity beyond the cosmos. It captures Lovecraft's writing effortlessly and brings it to the modern age flawlessly, with all the blood and insanity you could hope for.
Rolling in at number 3, we've got Splinter. Did somebody say low-budget fungus infection movie? No? Well, I mean, that makes sense. Why would somebody just say that at random? Well, now that we're on the topic, we might as well address it though. Splinter is a tense, enjoyable B-movie that doesn't get nearly enough attention. It kicks off with a couple of folks getting kidnapped by some drug-fueled rednecks, and after stopping at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, which is always a bad move, they realize that something is amiss. And by something, I mean an infectious splinter monster, and by amiss, I mean killing and devouring everyone it comes into contact with. It infects people by poking into their skin with its sharp pointy bits and working by sort of zombie rules. If it breaks skin or enters you in some other way, you're probably gonna turn. To add to this already difficult situation, dismembered infected parts can move around autonomously, and they are heat-seeking too. And the splinter things look pretty cool. Low budget ain't such a big deal when it's done as well as this. Splinter is a largely well-written and acted movie too. You'd expect a group of survivors in a situation like this to act as useless cannon fodder, but they're actually all useful and likable in their own special ways. They overcome personality flaws and maximize their strengths in the name of survival. Big ups to the folks behind these choices. Sure, the camera can get a little too shaky sometimes, but it does a very good job of selling and maybe hiding some of the other low-budget restrictions. Where did they come from? Where did they go? Why are these splinters causing blood to flow? Coming in at number 2, we've got Altered States. This is a drug-fueled existential trip that brings a man to the origin of all life. Based on the novel by Paddy Chayefsky, Altered State takes a look at a psychopathologist who wants insight into the mind, sensory deprivation tanks, psychedelics, the whole 9 yards. His marriage is failing, so what better time to head out to Mexico to give ayahuasca a try? After taking the journey, Edward brings some tincture home and keeps experimenting. By using some inside of a sensory deprivation tank, he's able to experience more intense visions, and these visions soon become physical reality. He actually literally becomes earlier versions of man, which naturally leads to caveman rampages through the city. This freaks out his colleagues, wife, pedestrians, you name it. But he keeps going. Again, in the name of science. Now, I don't want to spoil too much, so I'll pose a question instead. Given the ability to regress into literally nothing, would you let your consciousness rejoin the universe, or would you fight it and come back to reality knowing that there's more out there? Altered States is constantly wrestling with the origin of life by way of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Our scientist protagonist knows better, but he keeps coming back to the titular Altered States in order to experience the rush again. It's a fascinating exercise in pseudoscience with surprisingly crazy special effects. If you've ever wanted to see William Hurt run around as a deranged beige caveman, here's your opportunity. And at number 1, we've got The Hidden. Full disclosure, this flick did get a sequel. I know, how could I possibly say The Hidden is forgotten if 2 of them exist? Well, even with a cult following, I can't say too many people bring this one up these days, which is a travesty, but hopefully some more views will come after we discuss it. It's a frickin' slug alien intergalactic buddy cop movie. What's not to love? Somehow, a malicious extraterrestrial body snatcher has made it to Earth and wants to cause a whole lot of trouble. For an alien, it's got expensive taste and decides to rob a bank, snag a Ferrari, spend time at a strip club, and more. After infecting a few civilians via mouth transfer, the local police get involved. Obviously, they're in over their heads, so the FBI sends some dudes too. But our main dude, the ever-excellent Dale Cooper, well, he doesn't seem totally human. And human he is not. Teaming up with the people police, our alien law enforcer begins a quest to track down the luxuriously living larva from outer space. Although it sounds sort of silly when I put it that way, The Hidden is actually able to hit all sorts of marks. We get sci-fi thriller moments, action-packed sequences, and of course, plenty of dark humor. It even presents us with a plot to invade the government, which results in a presidential candidate firefight right in front of the press. Imagine what would happen if we saw something like that in real life. Damn.
Coming in at number 5, we have The Woman, 2011. The Woman is a story about the depth of human depravity, and it will truly linger with you for years to come. Now, this is a 2011 horror film directed by Lucky McKee, adapted by McKee and Jack Ketchum from Ketchum's novel of the same name. It is also a sequel to the 2009 film Offspring. The plot concerns a lawyer who puts his family in jeopardy when he captures the last member of a violent clan and tries to forcibly tame her. The woman's presence unleashes the barbariousness in the family, and her capabilities pale in comparison to the horrors of the lawyer and his son. The heinous acts ultimately lead to a massacre of the final act, with some moments that will leave you groaning in disgust and feeling physically sick. However, saying that, the movie is a clever inversion of the genre tropes, with the movie wearing its gender politics proudly. Critical reception for The Woman has been hugely positive, with it currently holding a rating of 71% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the general consensus reading strange, audacious, and aggressive. The Woman is an uneven horror flick that games viewers with a wildly bloody finale. Coming in at number 4, Tigers Are Not Afraid. Now, this film was hyped a lot, but I can safely assure you that the hype is warranted. The movie wowed festival goers for years, and this movie truly deserves all the praise it receives. Tigers Are Not Afraid is a 2017 Mexican crime fantasy film written and directed by Isa Lopez, set on the streets of a Mexico ravaged by the human trafficking ring known as the Huascas. The plot follows 2 orphans, Estrella and Shine, on the run from the cartel that murdered their parents. However, the film takes a turn when Estrella appears to possess 3 magic wishes, which arrive with bloody results. The movie is as beautiful as it is terrifying, with the same kind of magic which existed in Guillermo del Toro's movies, such as Pan's Labyrinth. Del Toro was also also a huge fan of the movie, with him calling Tigers Are Not Afraid an unsparing blend of fantasy and brutality, innocence and evil, innovative, compassionate, and mesmerizing. The movie was highly praised by critics, with the film holding a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the consensus reading, "Tigers Are Not Afraid draws on childhood trauma for a story that definitely blends magical fantasy and hard-hitting realism and leaves a lingering impact." Coming in at number 3, I've said it once, I've said it again, Session 9 is one of the greatest films. Brad Anderson blessed the horror genre with a small tale of encroaching madness that is absolutely haunting to behold. This 2001 psychological horror stars David Caruso, Peter Mullen, and Josh Lucas, and follows an asbestos abatement crew who begin to experience growing tensions while working in an abandoned mental asylum. This is paralleled by the gradual revelation of a former patient's disturbed past through recorded audio tapes of her regression sessions. Now, it should be said that there is really not much that is inherently terrifying about this film. There are no real jump scares, no blood or gore, and the pace is slow and action low. That rhymed. However, this slow burn has a way of creeping up on you, as the boundaries of sanity are blurred within the confines of an abandoned mental asylum. As the horror begins to unfold, a Lovecraftian descent into madness sweeps through the asylum, affecting every single crew member as they turn on each other, vanish, and reappear in this truly creepy narrative. Session 9 received mixed reviews, with the film currently holding a 63 approval rating, which is incredibly undeserving. It should be way higher. Bloody Disgusting ranked the film 5th in its list of 20 best horror films of the 2000s, writing, "Session 9 isn't just a cheap hack and slash, instantly forgettable type horror film, but a psychologically probing, deeply unsettling journey off the edge and into the abyss of the human mind. Honestly, I can't stress enough how frightening this movie is, not to mention its chilling conclusion. Please check it out." Next up at number 2, we have Eden Lake. If this list has taught us anything thus far, it's that the 2000s were filled to the brim with some of the greatest underrated horror movies of our time. Eden Lake was one of the greatest. Released in 2008, this British horror stars Kelly Riley and Michael Fassbender, as well as a very young Jack O'Connell. The plot concerns Jenny, a teacher, and her boyfriend Steve, who head to a lake to spend a peaceful weekend. However, a group of undisciplined teenagers irk them with their continuous pranks, ruining their weekend. And it is far more than childish pranks, with the weekend becoming a fight to survive for everyone involved. Now, the film itself is among a group of roughly contemporaneous films that deal with concerns over broken Britain and fears of hoodies. Now, for those not from the UK, broken Britain refers to a perceived widespread state of social decay in the UK, with hoodies being at the forefront and also referred to as chavs, lawless individuals who have no respect for society. But back to the film. After the couple confront the gang of unruly teens, their weekend descends into madness, as conversation escalates, with the teens quickly revealing themselves to be a sadistic force of violence. We hate to see it. Thankfully, the movie cleverly avoids the classist bent that threatens at every turn, instead focusing on the pressures and dangers of groupthink. Eden Lake was met with mostly positive reviews, with Rotten Tomatoes giving it 79%, with the general consensus reading, "A brutal and effective British hoodie horror that, despite the cliches, stays on the right side of scary." The movie, particularly if you're from Britain, is a truly harrowing experience, with many having their own stories of hooded thugs. It is a chilling experience that will linger in the pit of your stomach for days, even months. And last on our list, we have Triangle. From writer-director Christopher Smith, who put a delightfully cheeky spin on the backward slasher genre with Severance, he got even more creative with the 2009 movie Triangle. This psychological horror stars Melissa George and a young Liam Hemsworth, and centers on George's character, who portrays a single mother who goes on a boating trip with several friends. However, when they are forced to abandon their ship in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle, they board a derelict ocean liner where they become convinced that someone is stalking them. Now, George's character Jess is a woman with an undisclosed source of agony behind her surface level calm, with plenty being revealed throughout the duration of the movie. Now, it's tough to even discuss the film without giving away its twists and turns, which are superbly executed throughout. However, what I can say is that a vicious time loop thrusts the group into a nightmare scenario, with Jess emerging at a pivotal time that may be the key to their escape. Now, overlapping timelines is incredibly difficult to execute. However, Christopher Smith does this with grace, displaying the horrors of being trapped in one hellish loop. The film was received well by critics and viewers alike, with the movie garnering an approval rating of 80%, with the general consensus reading, "Triangle sails into some strange waters, but this intelligent, well-acted horror outing anchors its idiosyncrasies in a satisfying, scary story." Honestly, this film has stayed with me for many years, with it being one horror that isn't easy to forget for many reasons. Particular scenes linger in the mind, however, it's its unique delivery that will make you want to return time and time again. Coming in at number 5, we have The Invitation, 2015. The Invitation is a 2015 horror thriller film directed by Karen Kusama and stars Logan Marshall Green, Tammy Blanchard, and Michael Huisman from The Haunting of Hill House. Responding to an invitation from his ex-wife, a man brings his girlfriend to a dinner party. There, he relives the trauma of their child's death and becomes suspicious that his ex-wife has ulterior motives for inviting him. The Invitation is an insidiously subtle nightmare in which you are constantly going back and forth in your head. Is there something wrong at this party? Or is there something wrong with me? The movie manages to torture our minds from start to finish with its constant sense of unease and uncomfortable social interactions. The Invitation holds an 88% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with the critical consensus reading, The Invitation makes brilliant use of its tension-rich premise to deliver a uniquely effective and surprisingly clever, slow-building thriller. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if you get invited to a dinner party, just say no. Lucky for us, we're all self-isolating. Social distance. Coming in at number 4, we have Attack the Block, 2011. Attack the Block is a 2011 British science fiction horror comedy film written and directed by Joe Cornish and starring John Boyega, Jodie Whittaker, and Nick Frost. The film centers on a teenage street gang who have to defend themselves from predatory alien invaders on a council estate in South London on Guy Fawkes Night. Attack the Block is an effective genre mashup that blends sci-fi and comedy with creature feature horror, with the movie offering up immense tension as well as tons of laughs and engaging social commentary. Attack the Block received critical acclaim from critics, with it receiving a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the consensus reading, effortlessly mixing scares, laughs, and social commentary. Attack the Block is a thrilling, brisky-paced sci-fi yarn with a distinctly British flavour. Attack the Block is a movie that has something for everyone. It is also the place Star Wars star John Boyega got his start, making it a movie you should definitely take a look at. Attack the Block was revisited by critics following the casting of its 2 lead actors as stars of flagship science fiction franchises. As I mentioned, Boyega in Star Wars and Whittaker in Doctor Who. In a 2017 retrospective, Tom Phillips, writing for GQ, described the film as, I quote, "one of the most confidently delivered debut feature films in recent memory. It still stands out as one of the best genre mashup films of the decade. It is definitely worth your time."
Coming in at number 3, we've got April Fool's Day from 2008. See, if they were gonna make a remake of an April Fool's themed horror movie, why not resurrect Slaughter High? Too little too late, I suppose. Although everything will be remade eventually, because how else are studios gonna hold onto the rights of everything until the end of time? But I digress. This version of April Fool's Day is based on the 1986 flick of the same name. However, unlike the original, this one was destined for the small screen. Not even made for TV like Piranha. AFD 2008 was straight to video. You know what that means. Very few redeeming features. They tried to make something that star Scout Taylor Compton describes as Mean Girls crossed with horror, and those are lofty aspirations. Although if someone did it right, it could be a lot of fun. It's too bad they couldn't capitalize on that idea in 2008. It ended up feeling a lot more like an I Know What You Did Last Summer ripoff than an April Fool's one. And the comedy we were promised, well, it wasn't very funny, even in 2008. And the bar was not set very high at that point. It's not too surprising that this one went right to the bargain bins and then straight out of our collective memory. Maybe it's worth picking up on April Fool's Day, but don't expect to do much other than crack jokes. Coming in at number 2, we've got The Wizard of Gore from 2007. Who would have thought remaking Herschel Gordon Lewis films would one day be trendy? I suppose stranger things have happened. I'm sort of surprised that this one doesn't get talked about more, but what can you do? Maybe remakes of cult splatter oddities from the 60s and 70s just don't have the mass appeal you'd think they would. Even with Crispin Glover as Montag, it sort of misses the mark. Lots of fun though, with plenty of ooey gooey gore. The premise, for those unfamiliar with Montag the Magnificent, is that there is a traveling show featuring a mysterious magician. He brings beautiful women onto the stage and proceeds to eviscerate them in front of the audience. It's disturbing and all too real, but at the end of each show, the bloodied person is revealed to be actually fine. But then every volunteer ends up dead. Their death happens sometime after the end of the performance, but it always has something to do with the way they died on stage. Uh-oh. The movie doesn't follow Montag though. It focuses mostly on Edmund Bigelow, a weird journalist turned noir protagonist who finds it a little strange that Montag can perform live surgery. He starts digging and finds some stuff he can't explain. But is he going insane? Is the Wizard of Gore really murdering people? Can he carry this movie on his own? Satisfying answers to any of these questions are hard to find, which might have something to do with the forgettability. But isn't it wild that there's an HGL remake from the last 2 decades? Apparently somebody remade Blood Feast in 2016 too. Who knew? And coming in number 1, we've got The Uninvited from 2009. This one might not read as a remake at first. And it's not a remake of the 1944 supernatural horror. It's actually a remake of the 2003 South Korean film A Tale of Two Sisters, which is an adaptation of a Korean folktale. Lots to look at here. But back to The Uninvited, this is a pretty decent little adaptation. There have definitely been worse American remakes of Asian movies. Much worse. So why was this one sort of forgotten? Well, I think the different titles had something to do with it, and the fact that it was a remake of a relatively recent movie at the time from another country. That could have had something to do with its little renown. And of course, why watch a remake like this when you can watch the original? But hey, Elizabeth Banks and Emily Browning serve up some quality performances, and the twist is changed up enough that you can still get some enjoyment going in knowing that the two sisters aren't exactly what they seem. The Uninvited manages to eke out a little ground for itself and finds a semi-unique identity in doing so. So it might not have turned too many heads at the time of release, but it still holds up as a decent little horror flick, remake or not. Crashing to Earth at number 5, we've got Night of the Comet. If you enjoy Buffy the Vampire Slayer, then you have Night of the Comet to thank. Apparently it was a big influence on the creation of the titular character. Wicked. Night of the Comet is a Valley Girl goofball comedy complete with space dust zombie invasion. It kicks off as Earth passes through the tail of a comet with unforeseen circumstances. See, it's implied that this is the same comet that killed the dinosaurs, and people have decided to celebrate like it's the 4th of July. The morning after, anybody who wasn't safely contained in a steel box of some sort has become a sort of dust zombie. I wouldn't worry about that too much. Two sisters who were very much inside steel containers for reasons that are better seen than explained survive the initial transformation and decide to see what the world has to offer now that everyone's essentially dead. They meet a lovely truck driver and the trio begins their post-apocalyptic lives together. But surviving zombies isn't enough. No. To make this a true sci-fi horror, we're also introduced to some mad scientists. Strictly speaking, they're looking for a cure to this space disease, but they actually end up draining healthy people of all their blood and then leaving them to die. It's in the name of research. Science. Yeesh. Night of the Comet is a classic cheesy B-movie romp. It's packed to the brim with cliches and nonsense situations, but it's done with love and a sense of levity. You get a shopping mall montage a la Dawn of the Dead, but this time it's more actually shopping than survival. We've got a smattering of callbacks to classics through clever and on-the-nose addition of a movie theater set piece. And we get, as previously mentioned, a lovely mad scientist or two. It's just a lot of fun, okay? Coming in at number 4, we've got Virus. Hey man, the trendy thing to do right now is to watch virus movies, right? See what writers and directors predicted correctly and what they got wrong, maybe see that happy ending at the other end of the tunnel. Personally, I prefer to watch movies that don't make me think of a virus at all, but hey, different strokes for different folks. This post-apocalyptic Japanese sci-fi flick was the most expensive Japanese film ever made upon release. It was a Japan-America co-production, and for whatever reason, the Western release got about 40 minutes snipped, so look for the original if you can. Beautiful, poignant, and often heart-wrenching, it's not as goofy as some might make it out to be. After a mimic virus is accidentally released by Americans trying to prevent just that, it quickly spreads through Italy. Whatever virus this one attaches to gets amplified, and scientists quickly realize that that means the end for humanity. Starting as an outbreak movie, it transitions seamlessly into a disaster flick and a political thriller. World leaders do their best to prevent the spread as it becomes apparent that soon the global population will plummet. Eventually, most of the world has died off, and survivors from submarines and Arctic bases come together to repopulate the planet. Seems like a great solution until earthquakes threaten to set off nuclear warheads. Just one disaster after another, huh? I mean, if we can't look at that situation and say, thank goodness that's not us, then what can we do? Huge in its scope, Virus is tragic and beautiful. There are plenty of gory and corpse-filled scenes for all the hardcore folks out there too.
Number 3, The Void. Our next entry on this list is The Void, a 2016 horror flick by Steven Kostanski, another Lovecraft horror movie. Your host has a little bit of a bias, and this one's Canadian made, so I have to include it based on that alone. It also totally rocks, so there is that. The Void is another flick that feels like it time traveled through the mid-80s, and maybe it's just my personal taste, but that is very much a good thing. The Void seems like the kind of thing John Carpenter would have slapped his name on. A small-town deputy has his night wildly disturbed when he finds someone suffering from violent injuries, and after taking him to the local hospital, finds himself trapped in the hospital with his ex-wife, a nurse, who's dealing with a crisis of her own as the hospital is being overrun by an onslaught of mysterious injuries and madness. The two estranged lovers find themselves caught in a blood-soaked conflict between a sinister cult and some entity that appears able to revive the dead, albeit a bit twisted into horrifying monstrosities of flesh and bone. Now, if you're like me and you think The Thing is the greatest horror movie ever made, The Void feels like it could be its unofficial sequel. It's better than the actual sequel prequel to The Thing that they made. The special effects on the monsters are fantastic. If you're the kind of ghoul who loves puppets, prosthetics, and gallons worth of corn syrup blood, The Void has everything you are looking for in those 3 spades. And the plot is fun, and it has some good twists and turns, but let's be honest here. You're watching this one because it's got very gross monsters and really cool Lovecraft-inspired mythos of cults and a great god beyond the stars. You want my advice? Grab a friend or two, order the largest, greasiest pizza your local favorite spot has, grab a 2-liter of something carbonated, and have a great Friday night with this one. The Void to me is what a good horror movie should be. Gross, scary, a little stupid, and a ton of fun. Number 2, Hush. Okay, enough movies about incomprehensible horrors from beyond the stars. Let's reel it in a bit, and let's get back to some comprehensible horror. Home invasion. Lock those doors. Oh, sorry, I forgot to turn the volume up. Hush is a 2016 slasher home invasion movie coming to us from Blumhouse horror icon Mike Flanagan, director of a ton of amazing horror projects like Oculus, Dr. Sleep, Midnight Mass, The Haunting of shows, and Hush is no exception to that rule. A deaf and mute horror writer, that's why I did that before, who lives alone with her cat in the woods with a few isolated neighbors around her, becomes the unwilling target in the most dangerous game when a twisted hunter decides to make her his prey. After hunting her neighbor with a crossbow, he sets his sight on her next. When he learns that his next victim is deaf and mute, it seems like he finds himself thrilled at the possibility of a challenge. Now, Hush could have very easily just been your run-of-the-mill slasher home invasion movie, but it stands a lot taller than that with some incredibly fantastic sound design. I mean, I would hope so, given the premise of the movie and the name of the movie. The movie is so tense and saves its sounds really effectively for when it knows it's going to be the scariest. Makes it a lot scarier than the usual horror movies with a bombastic booming soundtrack and tons of scare hordes. It lets you really breathe in the tension. The cat and mouse game between the protagonist Maddie and the unnamed hunter feels deeply personal, putting you smack dab in the middle of it, chewing your fingernails the entire time as you hope for the best. Please check out Hush. Now, number 1, Green Room. Coming in at our number 1 spot is one of my favorite horror thrillers of all time, Green Room. An A24 horror classic before that was even a cool thing to describe your movie as. A failing Midwestern punk band are trying to hit it big while traveling the Northwest, barely scraping by on instant ramen and van life when they agree to play a gig at a rural roadhouse. Absolutely thrilled at the prospect of getting paid for once, the band takes the gig without asking any questions, only to swiftly discover upon arriving that they are in bad company. The bar is ran and owned by a skinhead gang who don't take kindly to them whatsoever. After the bassist witnesses a crime in the eponymous Green Room, the band is trapped by the gang who refuses to let them leave. Alive. From here, the movie turns into a sort of reverse home invasion as the band tries desperately to escape the clutches of the gang by any means necessary. Green Room is tense. You are going to feel like you are trapped in there with them. If you've ever survived a local DIY show basement, then the sights of Green Room will look pretty familiar to you. Setting a high-octane horror movie in such a hostile environment that you'll recognize makes it feel all the more real. You know, I've seen countless horror movies in haunted houses, but I can't name that many in a bar basement. Green Room is horror at some of its best, taking a concept I guarantee you haven't seen before and exploring it beyond just a simple bloody slasher. Fantastic camera work, dark humor, and a gripping plot with lovable characters and truly hateable villains. We are 3 paragraphs into me talking about this, and I haven't even dropped the biggest bomb, which is that the leader of the skinhead gang is played by Sir Patrick Stewart in one of his most unhinged roles ever since maybe American Dad. I'd say he steals this thing, but honestly everybody delivers. Anton Yelchin also delivers one of the best performances of his career as the band's weary, tortured bassist. Go into Green Room expecting a super tense, shockingly gory, but amazing horror movie if you can brave it. Just make sure you get a stamp on your wrist so you can leave.
Coming in at number 5, we have House of the Devil. After his incredible fall from grace with Cabin Fever 2, which he went on to disown, Ty West became an instant genre director to watch following his 2009 masterpiece, House of the Devil, which starred Greta Gerwig. That's right, Greta Gerwig, aka the director of Little Women. This horror film concerns a young college student who is hired as a babysitter at an isolated house and is soon caught up in a bizarre and dangerous event as she fights for her life. The film combines elements of both the slasher film and haunted house subgenres while using the satanic panic of the 1980s as a central plot element. House of the Devil is a delightfully old-fashioned tale of Satanism that remains one of the best things to come out of the vintage-tinged horror throwback. Now, eager for a sum of cash that could turn her life around, child, our protagonist Sam ignores all the red flags along the way until it is far too late and House of the Devil delivers maximum impact. It's a slow burn, that's for sure, but simultaneously creepy and beautiful. The film received hugely positive reviews, with Rotten Tomatoes gifting it an 87%, with the general consensus reading, though its underlying themes are familiar, House of the Devil effectively sheds the loud and gory cliches of contemporary horror to deliver a tense, slow-building throwback to the fright flicks of decades past. The movie suffocates you with its smoldering atmospheric dread and shocking moments of blunt violence. It is a must-watch. Coming in at number 4, one of my personal favourites, Trick or Treat. Michael Dougherty's Trick or Treat is perhaps the finest ode to Halloween ever created, and that's saying something. Released in 2007, this anthology film relates 4 Halloween horror stories with a common element in them: Sam, a mysterious child trick-or-treater wearing shabby orange footy pajamas with a burlap sack over his head. He is absolutely terrifying, trust me. The character in turn makes an appearance in each of the stories whenever a character breaks Halloween tradition. In this chilling horror, the residents of a small town are not quite what they seem. The local principal is a child-murdering sociopath, and the nubile virgin a wolf in sheep's clothing. Now, what makes this movie so effective is Michael Dougherty's obvious love and respect for the horror genre, tradition, holiday lore, and superstition. Without naming any names or dragging any previous horrors about Halloween, Trick or Treat is quite simply the quintessential Halloween film. Now, the film currently holds an approval rating of 84% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the general consensus reading a deftly crafted tribute to Halloween legends. Trick or Treat hits all the genre marks with gusto and old-fashioned suspense. Honestly, if you want to gear up for Halloween 2020, considering we're all in quarantine, we don't have anything else to do, I suggest you check out this holiday classic now. Coming in at number 3, Backcountry 2015. The only way to describe Backcountry is an utter anxiety attack from start to finish, and this is by far one of the greatest compliments you can give this movie, because it is utterly terrifying and so effective in delivering thrills and frights. This Canadian nature survival horror was written and directed by Adam McDonald, and is loosely based on the true story of a man-eating bear and 30-year-olds Mark Jordan and Jacqueline Perry in the backcountry of Missinaibi Lake Provincial Park north of Chapleau, Ontario in 2005, events for which Mark later received the Star of Courage Award for. Now, the plot concerns Alex and Jen, who have left the city to go camping in the country. After settling in the woods, they realize they've forgotten their phones and they become lost. Classic. Their trip then turns into a fight for survival when they are stalked by a man-eating bear. The tension from start to finish is palpable, from the conflict between the couple as they become lost, to them being relentlessly pursued by a grizzly bear. The drama is rich and the dialogue slow and steady. Throughout, you can't help but feel a sense of fear and nausea as you watch the movie from the comfort of your home. The movie was a huge success, with Backcountry currently holding an approval rating of 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the general consensus reading tense, well acted, and at once atmospheric as well as brutally impactful. Backcountry marks a memorably assured debut from writer-director Adam McDonald. Also, we all need to watch more Canadian cinema. Coming in at number 2, Under the Skin 2014. Under the Skin is a film that has lingered with me since the moment I watched it. There's something incredibly unnerving and uncanny about it. You can never quite relax or feel settled while watching, and that's why this ScarJo movie is so effective. Under the Skin was directed by Jonathan Glazer, who prior to this had directed 2 features, Sexy Beast and Birth, with Under the Skin displaying his true knowledge of horror. The film is loosely based on the 2000 novel by Michael Faber, and as I previously mentioned, stars ScarJo as an otherworldly woman who preys on men in Scotland. Glazer developed Under the Skin for over a decade. He and screenwriter Walter Campbell parted back from an elaborate special effects heavy concept to a sparse story focusing on an alien perspective of the human world. Now, a fun fact for you movie buffs out there, most characters were played by non-actors, and many scenes were filmed with hidden cameras, including the scenes where Scarlett Johansson lures men into her van. If you know, you know. Throughout this movie, ScarJo meets and seduces men for reasons unknown, before taking them back to a black room where they are forced to wade into a pool of liquid, seemingly oil, which ultimately sucks them down, leaving behind floating sacks of skin. The movie essentially uses sci-fi to tell a horror story about gender dynamics, and as I said before, viewing Under the Skin is a peculiar experience, with myself in particular feeling an uncomfortable sense of existential dread and horror throughout the duration of the movie. It's oblique, repetitive, and slow. It's bleak in ways that I can't explain, the acting, the lack of colour grade, the dreary Scottish weather. Every single aspect of it is intentional and effective, and once viewed you can't seem to shake it off. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have The Transfiguration, 2017. It is incredibly difficult to make a quality vampire movie, especially one that is not cheesy. Twilight. However, there has been a few hidden gems in the horror genre, from movies such as Let the Right One In, to The Lost Boys, to 30 Days of Night, and now The Transfiguration. The Transfiguration is a 2017 horror drama written and directed by Michael O'Shea and follows troubled teen Milo, who hides behind his fascination with vampire lore. When he meets the equally alienated Sophie, the two form a bond that begins to challenge Milo's dark obsession, blurring his fantasy into reality. As they become better friends, Sophie quickly learns that Milo truly believes he is a vampire. The film is refreshing in its choice of protagonist, as well as its use of vampirisms as a coping mechanism for rejection and isolation. The film was a hit among critics and horror lovers alike, with The Transfiguration holding an approval rating of 85%, with the consensus reading. The Transfiguration tells a quieter, more deliberately paced tale than the genre fans might expect, but for those with the patience to let it sink in, it offers its own rewards, and I couldn't agree more. It is definitely worth your time.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Piranha from 1995. The Piranha most people are familiar with these days is probably the 2010 3D schlockfest erected by Alexander Aja. Boasting a cast containing Adam Scott, Jerry O'Connell, Christopher Lloyd, Ving Rhames, and more, there was plenty of name recognition to be had. The insane amount of fun made it easy to remember too. But before there was Piranha 3D, there was plain old regular Piranha, made for TV. A remake of the 1978 classic put together by Joe Dante. That's right, Piranha 1995, and boy does this one get lost in the mix. When it comes to claims to fame, this version of the Killer Fish movie has very little. Mila Kunis is in it. That's right, in her debut role too, at age 12 as the daughter of intrepid homeowner Paul Grogan. Beyond that, I'm really not sure what there is to say about this version of Piranha. The screenplay is almost identical to the original with very little room to update for a modern audience. In fact, even the special effects were recycled from the 1978 version. That is some next level remake streamlining, eh? Most folks agree that although the two films are technically the same, all the humor seems to have been sapped from the 1995 version, making it much more of a slog to sit through. This probably has something to do with the fact that nobody remembers this movie. I suppose when you're on a made-for-TV budget trying to breathe some life into a 20-year-old movie, you're gonna have to make some concessions. At least they got it done, right? Really and truly, you're better off watching any of the other Piranha movies, even 3DD. That's right, this movie somehow manages to be less entertaining than 3DD. So unless you're a Mila Kunis completionist, and I'm sure some of you are, you should probably leave this remake in the forgotten pile, just to be safe. Coming in at number 4, we've got Black Christmas from 2006. Funnily enough, with all the Christmas decorations that pop up on November 1st, I was discussing Black Christmas with some friends the other day. Of course, the Bob Clark original is a bona fide classic and should be watched every December. But then I brought up the possibility of a Black Christmas marathon, 1974, 2006, and 2019, just for fun. To my surprise, the folks I was talking to didn't even know there was a 2006 remake, and really, this shouldn't have surprised me. It's a fascinating little case study. Plenty of actors who went on to be big in their own right, a trailer with a bunch of kills filmed without the director's knowledge, some additional backstory for the killer. It's a strange recipe, kinda like human flesh sugar cookies. But mostly, it works. This is by no means a bad movie, but it exists in a space where it's less good than the original and also has a more modern remake garnering a lot of attention. Plus, the mid-2000s were kind of rough when it came to horror. A lot of folks were paying attention to parodies and French extremist flicks, and that's about it. So when a remake of one of the most legendary slashers of all time popped up, it seemed to sort of just exist. But if you're looking for a Christmas movie that really dials up the festive fear, this is the one for you. I already mentioned the flesh cookies, so let's list off a few more holiday horrors you'll get to see while watching 2006's Black Christmas. We've got a wicked snowstorm leading to death by falling icicle. We've got the world's sharpest Christmas tree, and of course there are plenty of Christmas tunes to really set the mood. Plus, if you were just expecting Billy to make a return, think again. As the weather gets a little colder, consider dusting off this forgotten remake and take it for a spin. Before we get to number 3, if you guys are enjoying this video, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps with the algorithm. Thank you.
Coming in at number 3, we have Maniac, 2013. Maniac is a 2013 slasher film directed by Frank Calhoun and starring Elijah Wood and Noor Arnidada. It is a remake of the 1980 film of the same name and follows the violent exploits of a brutal serial killer. The movie is completely faithful to William Lustig's controversial film, while simultaneously doubling down on violence and delivering a pulverizing slasher. Maniac is a solid revival of a genre that was beginning to feel rather stale. Not to mention, with its throwback synthesizer score and shadowy lighting, the entire movie evokes a sense of dread from start to finish. Now, the movie polarized critics, with it receiving a 53% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with the consensus reading, "Shocking and bloody. Maniac is smarter than your average psychological slasher, but it's often undermined by its excessive gore." Now, some audience members had quite the visceral reaction when viewing the movie for the first time. Calhoun said that audience members have vomited and even fainted, and he took the reaction as a compliment, explaining, "We had a screening here in Los Angeles and somebody passed out, which I pat myself on the back for. The movie had to creep on you. It's a different kind of fear. It's more of a nauseating fear. You really have the opportunity to maybe feel the nausea of committing crime rather than glorifying it just for the aspect of fun and thrill. The audience gets to experience for the first time how sick it is to commit a murder. We're certainly not condoning it, but making a real statement about serial killers." Coming in at number 2, we have What We Do in the Shadows 2015. What We Do in the Shadows is a 2015 New Zealand mockumentary horror comedy film written and directed by Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi, and the first installment in the What We Do in the Shadows franchise. The film's plot concerns several vampires who live together in a flat in Wellington. Now, modern spoofs that are genuinely good are pretty hard to come by, with most of them flopping and flopping hard. However, What We Do in the Shadows is a comedy and horror masterpiece. The movie itself is a docu-style story of idiotic vampires. What's better than that? Yes. I did say it was a modern spoof film, however it doesn't overtly reference any specific horror movies, but instead makes jokes of all the tropes and cliches in classic vampire horror movies. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 96%, with the general consensus reading, "Smarter, fresher and funnier than a modern vampire movie has any right to be. What We Do in the Shadows is bloody good fun." Ultimately, what makes What We Do in the Shadows so great is that it was made for us, horror fans, and it isn't pandering to anyone else. Not to mention, it gets better and better the more times you watch it. Not to mention, Taika Waititi. It was essentially what gave him his big break. He's now doing Marvel, and he also did Jojo Rabbit, which, if you haven't seen Jojo Rabbit, I suggest you watch Jojo Rabbit. Should I say it one more time? Jojo Rabbit. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have The Witch, 2016. The Witch is a 2016 supernatural horror film written and directed by Robert Eggers in his feature directorial debut. The film stars Anya Taylor-Joy, Ralph Ineson, Kate Dickie, and Lucas Dawson. The plot follows a Puritan family who encounter forces of evil in the woods beyond their New England farm. The Witch is an incredibly effective movie that manages to make twin children and a billy goat some of the most terrifying villains of the movie. Wouldst thou like to live deliciously? The Witch relies on unsettling fear to instill dread, rather than relying on jump scares or overt scare tactics. The movie is a slow burn, however, from start to finish you're hooked and can't pull your eyes away from the screen. The film was a critical success, with it receiving an approval rating of 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the general consensus reading, "As thought-provoking as it is visually compelling, The Witch delivers a deeply unsettling exercise in slow-building horror that suggests great things for debuting writer-director Robert Eggers." Between Anya Taylor-Joy's mesmerizing performance, my friend Daniel says the devil himself, shout out Daniel, and the ominous entity in the woods, I'm seeking out Black Phillip's book to sign right about now. Now, it is safe to say that The Witch is a love it or hate it kind of movie, considering its pace and lack of overt scares. However, Leslie Coffin criticized A24 for this, saying that it was a huge mistake to market the movie as a terrifying horror, not because it doesn't fit into the genre of horror, but because of the power of expectations. The less you know about the movie, the better your experience will be, but everyone who saw it opening weekend probably walked in with too much knowledge and hype to really get as much out of it as they could have if the film had the veil of mystery. I honestly couldn't have said it better myself. First time I watched The Witch, I knew nothing at all about it, and I loved every single minute of it. But I also understand that a slow burn with not many jump scares isn't for everyone. Most people look for quick pace with horror, but The Witch will never offer that to you. But that's what makes it so effective. It's slow, it's eerie, there's not a lot of dialogue. That is what makes it so creepy. What exactly is in the woods? And why is this billy goat, Black Phillip, so terrifying? And, more importantly, why is he talking? And now, why is he a man?